So, hi Rupert. We are
Hello.
here in Beyond the Brain conference in London. So, I want to explore a little bit the relationship of your work with the transpersonal field. But first of all, if we can start reviewing a little bit your background, your academic background, just briefly.
Biologist. I'm
Yeah.
a biologist. Studied at Cambridge. Studied history and philosophy of science at Harvard. Did research at Cambridge. Worked in India in agricultural research. I've worked on developmental biology. And in 1981, I put forward the idea of morphic resonance, idea of memory in nature. Each species has a kind of collective memory. So Jung's collective unconscious would be one example of this, but I'm saying it's in all species, not just humans. And I'm saying that the laws of nature are more like habits. So this is part of my hypothesis of morphic resonance. And I've also worked on fields of the mind, the way the mind extends beyond the brain, invisibly, and the way that members of social groups are linked together through social fields, which I think underlie the phenomena of telepathy, which occurs in animals as well as people, and is very common with dogs and cats and other domestic animals. I wrote a book about that called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. In humans, these same phenomena occur, and they occur most commonly in relation to telephone calls. People think of someone who then rings, and it's not just chance. I've done experiments that show this is way above chance, this phenomenon. It also occurs with SMS messages and emails. So I think that telepathic connections are part of our biological nature. Mothers often have these with their babies during the period they're breastfeeding them. And they may be several kilometers away from the baby. And when the baby needs them, their breasts start tingling and their milk starts coming out, the milk let down reflex. And I've done experiments with mothers and babies and shown that this is not a chance, random coincidence. This is a direct connection, which I think is a fundamental physiological kind of telepathy. The body reacts. It's not about the higher conscious mind, it's about the body picking this up physiologically.
Okay, so I'm coming back a little bit to your first book regarding this hypothesis of the morphic fields. How was the reception of this work in that moment?
Well, it caused an enormous controversy. Some people really liked it. Transpersonal psychologists were very friendly. Stan Groff invited me to the 1982 Transpersonal Conference in Bombay, and I was working in India at the time, so I went to that. The Jungian societies in the United States and in Britain were very friendly, and I gave talks to them. Quite a number of biologists were very friendly. But then the book was attacked, violently attacked, by the editor of Nature, who was a militant atheist, a dogmatic materialist, and he called it a book for burning. And this caused an enormous controversy in the scientific world, which still goes on till today. When I gave a TED talk a few years ago, that was banned because militant atheists and materialists don't like what I'm doing at all. They think it's a betrayal of science. Whereas what I'm trying to do is enlarge the sphere of science to go beyond the dogmatic materialism that dominates it still.
Yeah. So I'm coming back to this idea of your involvement with transpersonal field. So your first involvement was that moment in 1982 when Stan Groff invited you?
Yes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, at that conference I met Jill Peirce, who's my wife, and so it was personally significant as well as my making contact with a whole different world. Before that, I'd been living in India for 5 or 6 years, working in agriculture in South India. I knew nothing about I'd never been to California. I knew nothing about the world of transpersonal psychology. I arrived at these theories through biology, not psychology. And then Stan invited me to go to Esalen to teach in his month-long program in California. And then many other people in California invited me, and I made many new friends there, including Terence McKenna, who became a very close friend and with whom I did 2 books, as well as with Ralph Abraham.
I know one of them.
Yes.
The trialogue about
That's right. We had every year we had these 3-way conversations: Terence McKenna, Ralph Abraham, and myself.
Oh wow!
And we made 2 books out of this. We also have maybe 20 or 30 of these discussions, which are now online in audio. Some of them were recorded, and they're now online, and quite a lot of people listen to them on the internet.
Pretty interesting. So your involvement finally has been really deep, no? I mean, starting from this connection with the Jungian psychology and the idea of the archetypes and the collective unconscious, and then your connection with Stan Grof and then the biggest transpersonal movement, not only transpersonal psychology. So then also your last 2 books are really more linked specifically with the transpersonal psychology field, no? Because you are doing this connection between spiritual practices and personal change and growth and well-being. So can you explain us a little bit about those last 2 books?
Yes, the last 2 books, Science and Spiritual Practices and Ways to Go Beyond and Why They Work, are books about scientific studies of spiritual practices. The reason I wrote them is because I'm a scientist. I'm interested in the scientific study of these things, and I also do these spiritual practices. And there are many people now who take up spiritual practice. Meditation is done by many millions of people in Europe. Yoga is enormously popular. Many people pray. There's an enormous increase in pilgrimage, largely based on the model of the pilgrimage to Santiago in Spain. So Spain has really been the country from which this revival of pilgrimage in Europe has radiated. And here in Britain, I'm the patron of an organisation called the British Pilgrimage Trust. We're reopening the old footpath pilgrimage routes in Britain. And this is becoming a very popular movement here too. So I think there's a kind of spiritual revival going on, and we're in a unique position historically because we now have access to spiritual traditions from all over the world. They're being studied scientifically, and the science is not debunking them. What it's showing is that these practices have beneficial effects on physiology, health, well-being. People who do them are happier and healthier than those that don't.
So, and inside all these practices that you resume in these 2 books, you are also talking about the benefits of psychedelics, no? In a well-controlled context. Yeah.
Well, I think psychedelics for many people today provide a kind of rite of passage, an opening to realms of consciousness that they haven't otherwise been told about or explored. I mean, of course, they can be dangerous for some people. I'm not advocating an indiscriminate use of psychedelics by everybody. But I think that under appropriate conditions, they can be very helpful. And recent research on psychedelics is showing great therapeutic benefits for people who are depressed, addicted, or suffering from other psychological problems. So I think they have an enormous therapeutic potential. And this was something that was widely recognized in the 1960s and early 70s, before they were made illegal. So what's happening is really there's a resurgence of psychedelic research, taking up where those early studies left off after a break of decades.
So the last question, we were talking that we are in a very special moment. What do you feel is the future of the field of transpersonal psychology and the transpersonal movement in general?
Well, I think there's an enormous interest in exploring the nature of consciousness, both within the academic world and outside it. And I think transpersonal psychology has a big role to play in all that. I mean, a lot of people I talk to don't come to this through transpersonal psychology. They come to it because they're interested in meditation, or they like going on pilgrimages, or they're interested in yoga, or they pray, or they go to religious services and rituals, or they like singing and chanting. So they don't always necessarily do this because of academic or research studies in these fields. But I think transpersonal psychology is the field which covers these areas most thoroughly, and which provides a way of bringing them into the academic and the intellectual world in a scientifically respectable.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rupert, and I hope to see you in Barcelona soon presenting your new book. So
Good, thank you.
hope to see you in there in 2020.
Good.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
So